Pravaitraikapanaya Jnana-mudraya Krishnaya Geetamrita-duhe Namaha. Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Shastri course. We are in the 15th chapter. We discussed the first two sections of the 15th chapter. Let's have a quick overview. So, first was about the upside down banyan tree, attain liberation by detachment. And if one is not detached, then one goes on in the cycle of birth and death. So this section goes from 7 to 11. We have discussed till 10th verse. The 10th verse talked about Jnana-chakshu, about seeing with the eyes of knowledge. So now the question may come up, why do some people have Jnana-chakshu and others don't have Jnana-chakshu? What is the difference? So that is talked about in this particular verse. 15.11 Yatanto yoginaschainam pasyantyatmanyavasthitam yatanto apyakritatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. So it's yatanto yoginaschainam. The yogis, those who are striving for yoga, yatanto, so they endeavor, and cha enam. Enam means this. This is what? This reality of how the soul is trapped in material existence and is dragged around by the modes. So, pashyanti. So, the yogis who endeavor, they pursue. How do they pursue? Atmanyavasthitam, by becoming situated on the spiritual platform. But on the other hand, yatanto api akruta atmano. Yatanto api. Others may endeavor, but still they are akrutatmano. They are not situated on the spiritual platform. Atmana is the soul. Akruta means they have not actually adequately situated themselves on the spiritual platform. They're not at the Atma level, and therefore nainam pashyantya chetasaha. Nainam pashyanti. One is not able to perceive a chetasaha. Because of misdirected consciousness, one cannot perceive. So basically there's a contrast here between those who is able to perceive, one whose consciousness is both are endeavoring. The word yatanto comes for both, but one is atmanyavasthitam and the other is akrita atmano and achetasaha. So they are not able to perceive. So that means it is not just enough that we desire and strive to perceive the spiritual reality. That yes, so Jnana-chakshu, and so the previous verse had the word Jnana-chakshu. Now here the word is pashyati. Yes, this logical connection. With eyes we see. So what is required for developing this Jnana-chakshu? It is not just endeavor. Endeavor is important, but that endeavor should lead to a transformation by which one can become atmanyavasthitam. One becomes situated on the spiritual platform. Srila Prabhupada would give the example that just endeavor or willpower alone is not enough. If a person is blind and does a beautiful painting, maybe the world's most beautiful painting, say a Mona Lisa or some other painting like that, even from the secular point of view, what is considered to be very artistically magnificent. Now if a person just stands in front of a painting and stares and glares and peers, it is not going to much make difference. No matter how long a person stares and glares, that person is not going to be able to see. A process is required. What is the process? The process is a process of healing, a process of surgery or healing or whatever, by which the person will develop the eyes to see. So just endeavor is not enough. There has to be guided endeavor. So the guided endeavor will involve some treatment by which a person can get the eyes and see thereof. So both are yatanto, but just by yatanto, it's not that pashyanti will come. But along with yatanto, there has to be a transformation by which atmanyavasthitam, one becomes situated on the spiritual platform. Now it may seem a little bit a kind of a circular logic which traps us. It says that to see the soul, we have to be situated on the spiritual platform. And those who can't see the soul, they can't see the soul because they are not situated on the spiritual platform. Now we wonder what comes first. If I can't see the soul, I won't feel inspired to become situated in the spiritual platform, to try to advance to the spiritual level. And if I'm not advancing to a spiritual level, I can't see the soul. So where does it begin? So we can rephrase this as, two words, perceive and pursue. Perceive is to see, and pursue, P-E-U-R-S-U-E, pursue is to go after. So what comes first? Does the perceiving come first or pursuing comes first? So do we pursue the spiritual platform first and then we will come to perceive it, or do we perceive it first and then we start pursuing it? Actually, what comes first is hearing, is submissive hearing. By hearing we understand there is a higher reality. So there is a higher reality, and then that triggers both. We get some perception of that reality, and that inspires us to pursue it further. And then when we pursue it more, we perceive it more, and then that inspires us to pursue it further. So we could say that the initially we have to do a little bit of pursuing by hearing. When we hear, by that we start pursuing. That itself is a pursuing, basically. Seeking, that's Adav Shraddha, with a little faith. What is that faith? We have discussed it as just inquisitiveness, but a serious inquisitiveness. Okay, well, what is this actually? So it may even be a positive curiosity. It may not be a very life-transforming inquisitiveness at that stage. That stage will come later. But even if there is an initial inquisitiveness, a positive, favorable curiosity, that itself is a pursuit. Okay, let me find out what is the spiritual level. That will begin the process. And yatanto api akrutaatmano nainam pashyanti achetasaha. Nainam pashyanti. One cannot perceive because achetasaha. The consciousness is caught at the material level. So Krishna has talked about this achetasaha and similar concept, a point of not being able to perceive in bhogaishwarya pasaktanam taya apaharita chetasam. Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidiyate. So chetasam is apaharit. The consciousness is abducted. Apaharit can also be kidnapped. So the child, when a child is coming from, say, school to home, at that time child wants to go in a particular way, but some kidnappers come and they take the child somewhere else. So apaharan is kidnapping. So actually we have to be careful. If we don't want our consciousness to be kidnapped, aparita chetasam. So what causes the aparita chetasam? That is the attachment to matter. So if we don't want our consciousness to be kidnapped, we should not be kids and we should not take naps. What does that mean? Don't be kids and don't kidnap. So don't be a kid, don't take a nap. What does it mean? Don't be a kid means don't be naive, don't be childish. We have to recognize that spiritual life is a serious pursuit. And children may be casual, playful, frivolous. Sometimes they like something, so they will play. Sometimes they don't like it, they will not play. They'll just give it up. So they have hobbies. I take one thing as a hobby, tomorrow another thing as a hobby. So they are casual. But we cannot be kids like that in our pursuit of spiritual life. We have to be serious. Serious means we have to recognize. We grow up. When adults grow up, they recognize. Now, normally, if we are working in a company, sometimes if say we have got a difficult work to do, so if the boss gives some work, and we don't do the work, and then the boss asks, "Why didn't you do it?" Will we say, "I didn't feel like doing it"? No, we will not say like that. Yeah, the boss will say, "I don't feel like employing you. Get out." He shows the door. Then it doesn't work like that. So we may have our feelings, but we subordinate our feelings. So kids are often ruled by their feelings, but adults, at least to some extent, are meant to rule their feelings. So when we rule our feelings, then that doesn't mean that we switch off all the feelings, but then we know when to be guided by the feelings and when to control the feelings. So that is important. So don't be a kid and don't take naps. Don't take naps means we can't become lazy. A nap means just go off to sleep. So we have to be constantly alert. we recognize that if I have to rise to the spiritual platform, it has to be a continuous, steady pursuit. If at any moment I lower my guard, what will happen? Maya is just waiting outside and Maya will come and catch me. Nikatastha Maya tare, chapatiya dhare. Nikatastha Maya is right close by and is waiting, chapatiya dhare. Actually, the chapatiya, pounce and capture. That is very, can be related very easily with kidnapping. Kidnappers, what they do, you see? As soon as they get an opportunity, they pounce on the child and drag away. So like that, what we have to do is we have to be alert. So we have to know that Krishna consciousness is not just momentary or short-lived peaks of ecstasy. There has to be a steady climb in our consciousness. And the peaks of ecstasy may sometimes come and we feel very high, we feel wonderful. Oh, I feel so happy in devotional service. I feel like dancing and singing, and I feel joyful. But then other times I feel so dry. But either we feel high or we feel dry. We recognize that I have to keep going on. So it's a steady climb which we have to do. So those who don't do this, don't do akritatmana. Those who don't do all this homework of situating oneself on the spiritual platform. Situating oneself on the spiritual platform is not an abstract concept. It's not that. Sometimes when we go in a program, there is a stage. So you go and stand on the platform. So is spiritual platform like that? Some platform somewhere we go and stand on it. So situating ourselves on the spiritual platform means basically acting at the level of the soul as much as possible, and not acting at the level of the body. At the level of the body means what? My eyes see something attractive and I think, oh, this is so attractive, I want to go and enjoy it. My tongue, I see something beautiful, delicious, immediately my tongue says, I want to enjoy it, and we go after it. So acting at the bodily level means letting the bodily desires and drives rule our life. Acting at a spiritual level means letting the needs and the opportunities of the soul guide our life, shape our life, mold our decisions. So it's not an abstract conception. It's not to be at the spiritual platform. One doesn't necessarily have to be fully self-realized. We cannot be entirely at the spiritual platform right now, but we can act at the spiritual level to a significant extent by choosing to not let the bodily drives and desires rule our life. So those who don't do this, those who let the bodily desires and drives rule their life, what happens is achetasaha. For them, their consciousness gets dragged away from Krishna. Krishna has used the word achetasaha also earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, even he's talking about the faithless people. He talks about the faithful people in 3.31, and 3.32 he talks about the faithless. Yetvaetadabhyasu yanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvagyana vimudham stvam vidhi nashtan achetasaha. So achetasaha, he says, those who are envious of me, those who don't have faith in my words, even if they have knowledge, sarvagyana vimudham stvam, the knowledge gets destroyed because vidhi nashtan achetasaha. Achetasaha, their consciousness gets dragged away from Krishna. So achetasaha. Now, when here Krishna is using the word achetasaha, so chetasa is related with chetana, consciousness. So achetasaha means one is not conscious. So now we are actually always conscious of something. Where if somebody is absent-minded. Now, when we say absent-minded, that doesn't mean the person doesn't have a mind. That the person is absent the mind. The mind is not where we are. Where the body is physically present, the mind is not there. So like that, achetasaha means not that the person doesn't have consciousness. The person has consciousness and the person is conscious. But the person is not conscious of what one should be conscious of. So achetasaha means if one should be conscious of spiritual reality, but instead, because of excessive and unregulated material desires and material attachments, one is not conscious of Krishna, one is simply conscious of matter. So how can this happen? We may go to the temple and beautiful darshan over there, beautiful deities are there, but if we are agitated by lust, we may not be taking darshan of Krishna. We may be fantasizing about other things when we are meant to take darshan of Krishna. So Krishna is right in front of us, and our eyes may also be on Krishna. But if we are captivated and fantasizing about other things, then achetasaha, we are in front of Krishna, but we are not looking at Krishna. So achetasaha. So yatanto api akrita atmano nainam pashyanti achetasaha. So even if one endeavors, but if one is not striving to situate on the spiritual platform, then one cannot perceive the spiritual reality. Then we may say, what exactly is the yatanto in the second case referring to? Yatanto refers to misinformed endeavor. Misinformed endeavor means that, as I said earlier, a blind person just trying to stare and stare and stare and glare and glare and glare at a painting in order to see it. That endeavor is misinformed and it is unproductive. But when there is well-informed endeavor, when guided endeavor, then that becomes productive. So the difference between the two is proper or improper endeavor. And proper and improper is determined by whether it is guided or not guided. So Prabhupada explains that even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, even though they are endeavoring, they are not self-realized. And they cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. That means they have a hazy conception of, not self-realized means they have a hazy conception of the soul. Because of the hazy conception, they do not take tangible steps towards self-realization. And that's why they have neither comprehension nor transformation resulting from it. Now let's look at the next verse. So from here the next section is starting. The next section is how Krishna assists us in our material existence and our spiritual endeavor. So what is the connection between the two? How Krishna assists us in our material existence, that is described from verses 12 to 14, and our spiritual endeavor, that is described in verse 15. So the correlation between this and the previous verse is that the previous verse said that the people should have Jnana-chakshu so as they can pursue the Atma. But the question comes up that what if a person is not able to pursue the Atma? What if a person is at the bodily level itself and the person is not so developed in consciousness or thinking to be able to perceive the soul? Then how can such a person make spiritual advancement? Or is it that for such a person spiritual advancement is blocked? No, it's not blocked. Actually Krishna starts talking about himself and how the Jnana-chakshu can work in a different way. See, the Jnana-chakshu can perceive the Atma, or we can work and we can instead try to pursue the hand of God. We can try to pursue Krishna's role in our life. What is the difference between the two? Perceiving say Atma Tattva. Actually perceiving Atma Tattva requires more critical thinking, more intellectual sophistication, more depth of penetration in contemplation. That is not always easy. But even if somebody is at the material level of consciousness, one is not able to perceive spiritual reality, it doesn't matter. Even if the person is at the material level of consciousness, one can see the hand of God in material things. At whatever material things we have, even those we cannot get by ourselves. Even those come to us by the arrangement of the Lord. That's what we talk about in the next verse. So actually, let's look at this. So, get jnana by perceiving higher arrangement in material world. So we want Jnana-chakshu. We can't perceive the Atma, but still we can get some jnana. We can start perceiving the spiritual reality in terms of Krishna's hand. So higher arrangement. So the 12th verse talks about cosmological arrangement. 13th verse talks about the terrestrial arrangement. 14th verse talks about the physiological arrangement. And 15th verse talks about the spiritual arrangement. So cosmological refers to the universe, terrestrial refers to the earth, and physical refers to the body. So we can see this Atma is encased in various coverings. The Atma is in case, so the Atma is at a broad level, we are in the material world. That is our broad material, that is the broad material covering around us. Then within the material world, we are on a particular planet, we are on the earth, so that is referring to the terrestrial. So there also, in this particular enclosure also, we need some facilities for living, and within that we are living on this, in this body. The body also needs to be maintained. So let's look at how Krishna arranges for our maintenance at the material level by looking at some examples. So 15.12, Yadadittigatam tejo jagadbhasayate akhilam yachandramasi yacchagnau tattejo viddhimamakam. Yadadittigatam tejo, yadadittigatam. So Aditya-gatam is the sunshine. So Aditya is sun, Aditya-gatam is sunshine. So in Aditya-gatam tejo, the splendor of the sunshine, Jagat bhasite akhilam. So the whole universe gets illumined by Jagat by the sun. And then Yachandramasi Yachagnav, the moon and the fire. Tattejo viddhimamakam, mamakam. That tej comes from me, viddhimamakam. That effulgence comes from me. What this means is Yad aditgatam tejo. So now Krishna has used these same three, the sun, the moon and the fire, earlier in 15.6. Natad bhasete suryo na shashanko na pavakaha. So here the same three objects are used, all the names are different. There was Surya, here it was Aditya, there it was Shashanka, here it is Chandra, and there it is Pavaka, here it is Agni. But the objects referred to are the same. So the point is, what Krishna is saying, that in the spiritual world these are not required, because spiritual world everything is self-luminous. But that is not the case in the material world. In the material world the reality is not self-luminous. So we need sources of illumination. So the things are not self-luminous. So these are the three representative sources of illumination. And actually they are not just source of illumination, they are also sources of sun, if we consider, it's also a source of nutrition. So the nutrition also takes place by the arrangement of the sun. Sun gives energy, by which photosynthesis happens, and then we get food. But even if we consider illumination, still at a universal level, without the energy coming from the sun, nothing would have been possible. So now Krishna is saying that the important point is Tattejo viddhimamakam, that their effulgence comes from me. Now what do we mean by this point, that their effulgence comes from me? So is it that the sun is having its effulgence and the sun has some other source from which the effulgence comes? Now this may seem to be disproved by modern science. Modern science will say that there's a particular process. Of course, that process sometimes, there is one explanation of the process, but there are sometimes alternative explanations also given, and there is debate. But whatever, scientists will say that there is some mechanical process by which the sun is giving light. So where does God come into the picture? See, the understanding is that the mechanical process is a partial explanation. What started the mechanical process? What sustains the mechanical process? That is the arrangement of God. So Tattejo viddhimamakam means that this illumination is made by my arrangement. We may study the arrangement, and studying the arrangement can be helpful, but beyond the arrangement is the arranger. We may study the design, but beyond the design is the designer. So Tattejo viddhimamakam, Krishna is saying that it is I who make all these arrangements by which you can live, by which illumination is possible and existence becomes possible. So this is the Krishna's arrangement at the cosmological level. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, he begins by saying, the unintelligent cannot understand how things are taking place. The unintelligent, so this unintelligent refers to vimudha. Vimudha na anupashyanti. The unintelligent cannot understand how things are happening. So that means they just say, oh, the sun is there, it's there. Sun gives light, very good. Enjoy the light. But yes, that is how the animals live. And when the sun comes, the birds start chirping, and the animals may start, if they are not nocturnal animals, the animals wake up and then they start moving around. So that's what the animals do. Animals don't think about why. They just think, okay, things are there. Yes, season has come. Enjoy now. Season has gone. Now, what should we do? So they don't really think about why things are. So animals can only think about how. Okay, how can I get food? How can I get a mate? How can I get shelter? They cannot think about anything much beyond that. We human beings, however, can think not only about the how questions, but the why questions. So science largely focuses on answering the how question. The how question means, okay, what is the mechanism by which the sun gives light? That's fine. There may be some mechanism, and investigating that mechanism can give us some understanding. But why? Why does the sun exist at all? Why does the sun give light? Now, if we look at even if we consider from the perspective of modern cosmology, then the sun is at a particular distance from the earth. So even if we assume that life requires the kind of conditions that modern science considers necessary, that means oxygen and water and a particular temperature range, so then we find that actually, according to modern science itself, if the earth would have been slightly closer to the sun, if the earth would have been, say, in the position of Venus instead of its own position, so we have the earth is the third planet according to modern cosmology. So then, if it had been in second position, then what would have happened is the earth would have become too hot for life as we know it to exist. And if the earth had been in a position slightly away from the sun, that is at the position of Mars, then it would have been too cold, and again life would have been difficult. So either way, the point is that now the Vedic culture says that life exists everywhere, and life can exist in all possible conditions, in different possible conditions. Because the Atma is not affected by any material condition. Atma is sarvagata, and it is achedya dhyayo kledya shushyevacha. It is not destroyed by anything material. So that is, in principle, that is correct. But now when we are looking at things, this Jnana-chakshu, we are trying to look from the point of view of people who are at the material level of consciousness. How they can begin to appreciate God. So in the initial stages of scientific research, when scientists studied the universe, actually, if you look at all the pioneering scientists, Newton, Galileo, and that is right at the start of the scientific revolution, but throughout the centuries, the leading scientists, they were all believers in God. If we consider Kelvin or Pasteur or any of the other scientists of the later century, the 19th century also, almost all of them believed in God. And the reason for their belief was not just religious. Religion at that time was taking a beating. Christianity was taking a beating, but still there are many scientists who continue to believe, not just because of their religious predispositions, but also because of their scientific conclusions. That they felt that by the study of science, they had uncovered such a majestic order, majestic harmony, majestic intricacy, that they said this reflects a superhuman mind, a supreme intelligence. So it's only later that after Darwin's theory of evolution and subsequent ideas, that scientists became overconfident, and they felt that there's no need for God, and they rejected God. So we discussed earlier about how there is theism, there is deism, and there is atheism. So theism is the understanding that God is the creator and the controller. Deism is the idea that God is the creator but not the controller. And atheism is the idea that God is neither the creator nor the controller. So that God doesn't exist only. So science itself can at the very least help us to move towards deism, that God is the creator. Things cannot have started on their own. But if we let science move forward, then science not only reveals a deistic conception, but also a theistic conception. So theism is the idea that God is not just the creator, but also the controller. So that we will see in 15.15 when we come to it. See, deism is the idea that the universe is like a clock. Now, a clock surely requires a maker. But after the clock is made, now the clock has been given to people. A clock has been handed over to the customer, and now the creator of the clock doesn't have any control. The clock is made by a mechanism, the clock learns according to the mechanism. So that is the idea of many scientists. The universe is like a clock, and it functions according to its own rules. So the mechanisms have been set up, and it functions according to those mechanisms. That is true. That is the way normal way things function. And scientists don't deny that. Even theistic scientists don't deny that there are mechanisms. But where do those mechanisms come from? The mechanisms are set up by the Supreme Lord. And they are set up by the Supreme Lord, and under His supervision, by His guidance, things work. Maya adhyakshena prakriti. So the word adhyakshata indicates that Krishna is overseeing. He's not directly involved. He doesn't touch material nature, but He oversees. But His sight alone is enough for the actions of material nature to take place. Maya adhyakshena. So when we look at the majesty of material nature, we understand that yes, this is all by Krishna's arrangement. So from the point of view of the Bhagavad Gita, here Krishna is revealing. So this is just one example. But from this example, we can understand the underlying point that Krishna is saying. That even if somebody is the material level of consciousness, still at the material level of consciousness also, for existence and enjoyment, there are so many background arrangements needed. And those background arrangements don't come by chance. They come by divine plan. And through that recognition of the divine plan, one can appreciate the arrangement of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada explains that so without His mercy there cannot be sun, there cannot be moon, there cannot be fire. And without the help of sun, moon and fire, no one can live. These are some thoughts to provoke Krishna consciousness in the conditioned soul. So this is an interesting word, provoke. Provoke, generally we use the word provoke in terms of negative, provocative. Provocative sights, provocative sense objects. Provoke. So the idea of provoke is there is a forceful shaking up. So if we contemplate seriously, a person gets forcefully shaken up. That's why I think it is Pascal. I have written about this in my book Science and Spirituality. Pascal, I think, who said that a little of science takes a man away from God, but immersion in science brings a person back to God. So little of science gives a person infatuation, intoxication. Yes, I know everything. I don't need God. We can explain everything without God. But when one goes deep into science, one starts understanding, oh, actually God is required. God is essential. So that's how things move forward. Now, so when we contemplate on the nature of the universe seriously, it provokes Krishna consciousness. It forces us to recognize the hand of God and become conscious of Him. So if after the cosmological, now let's look at the terrestrial arrangement. So, Gama Vishya Bhutani Dharayami Hamojasa Pushnami Chaushadhi Sarva Somo Bhutva Rasatmakaha. Gama Vishya. So Gam is the planets. Avishya, entering into them. Bhutani. The living entities also. Dharayami aham ojasa. Dharayami is to maintain aham ojasa. Ojasa is by my energy. The word ojasa generally refers to energy. So Krishna says, I am sustaining all the planets along with other living entities by my energy. How? Avishya, by entering into them. Then further he says, Pushnami chaushadhi sarva. So Pushnami, it is I am nourishing the aushadhi. The word aushad often we use it in conversational sense to refer to medicine, but it also in general refers to vegetables and plants and herbs. So they are also some medicines and medicinal components. So Pushnami chaushadhi sarva. So actually I nourish all the plants and vegetables. How? The vegetables especially. Somo bhutva rasatmakaha. As the moon, I provide the rasatmakaha. I provide the juice that nourishes the vegetables. Rasatmakaha. So here what is happening? Krishna is illustrating a principle again. What is the principle? That He provides arrangement. So now we may say that why are the planets sustained in their particular orbits? It is because of gravity. So when Krishna is saying it is I who sustain. So what does it mean, I who sustain? So how do we understand this? Actually, ultimately, gravity is also acting by the will of Krishna. Now, all the rules of material nature, the laws of material nature, they are all acting by the will of Krishna. So it is Krishna who has made the arrangement for the force of gravity. And even scientists admit that often their what they call as explanations are often descriptions. They are not really explanations. What does it mean? What is the difference between a description and an explanation? Description simply means that, okay, something is there and we describe. This is how it is, this is how it is, this is how it is. Explanation means we give causes. So, now if we ask what is gravity? Gravity is, a non-technical, a generic definition. Gravity is the force that keeps the planets in their orbits. And then, then what keeps the planets in their orbits? Gravity. So, what is happening over here? What is gravity? The force that keeps planets in their orbit. And what is the force what keeps planets in their orbit? That is gravity. So this is circular. So where is the explanation over here? So actually, just naming a pre-existing phenomena, is it really an explanation of that phenomena? Scientists may say, no, we have got the equation for it. Yes, the equation is fine, but even Newton himself admitted that actually, one of the peers of Newton was Leibniz, and Leibniz said that, this whole idea of gravity smacks of occultism. Occultism is said to be unscientific. The whole idea of spirits and energies going through space. He says, what is the medium through which the whole force of gravity is coming from another planet to this planet, and how is it connected? And he said, what is the explanation for this? So Newton frankly admitted, he says, I'm not talking about ontology here. I'm not talking about nature of existence. What is the source of this force? I'm simply giving mathematical formulation for an observed phenomena. So we see that planets move in particular orbits, and I'm giving a mathematical equation by which we can explain those motions. So to whatever length it goes, it is useful. But the point is again that here we are not going to causes. Now, of course, Einstein later on came up with the idea of space-time, and therein he said that gravity is a characteristic of space-time. Now, I don't want to go into science too much. We are studying Bhagavad Gita here, but the point is that is also a piling of concepts. First, to explain an observed phenomena, we postulate an invisible concept called gravity, and then after that, for explaining as a part of explanation for gravity, we postulate another concept called space-time. So we are just piling up concepts. So what exactly is being explained? What is at the bottom of the chain of inference, which is solidly rooted? There is nothing. So that's why there is a serious issue over here, the serious problem here. Now, when we move forward and recognize that ultimately, Srila Prabhupada would give the example that if a person is observing, normally when we see light, when we are moving along in an area where there's light, and suddenly light stops, we wonder what happened. Has the power got switched off, or we look at it, okay, maybe there was power over there, but the light reach doesn't come over here. So what happens is, we understand that darkness is the absence of light. On the other hand, if a person has always lived in light, and after living in light for a long time, the person suddenly comes out, and then the person comes out and starts looking. Okay, where is this? When suddenly the person sees light, and the person asks, "Oh, how is darkness produced light?" Actually, from that person's limited experience, the question seems to be natural and valid. Okay, I was in darkness, suddenly I'm seeing light. So darkness was what I had experienced. So from darkness, light has come. So how did it come about? But the person has got the question all wrong. Actually, the question is not how darkness produces light, because darkness never produces light. Rather, darkness is nothing but the absence of light. Similarly, to try to explain how matter and material, at the material level, everything can be explained, including the intricacy of all the arrangements, without considering any ultimate cause. That is a invalid understanding. as incorrect understanding. So we got all the questions wrong. So consciousness comes first, and consciousness arranges matter. It is not that matter produces consciousness. That's what Krishna is pointing towards in this verse when he says that actually it is I who sustain the planet. So there may be some material mechanism, but it is Krishna's presence within everything that sustains it. So dharayami hamojasa. Dharayami. So Prabhupada explains that by his strength and energy, all moving and non-moving things stay in their place. That it is said in the Vedic hymns that because of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sun is shining and planets are steadily moving. So it is by his arrangement that all these things are happening. So were it not for him, all the planets would scatter like dust in air and perish. They'll perish. So Prabhupada gives the example also of a person who is of the soul. They say the soul gives life to the body. Matter is heavy, but the presence of soul makes matter light. And then the person moves around. When the soul dies, one soul by its presence can make the body run around, dance and skimp and play. But when the soul dies, and what happens? The body is so heavy that one person finds it impossible to lift. Actually, often when there's in the procession is to be taken to crematorium, and the 4 people required, and when the 4 people are not enough, their shoulder gets starts paining, and they keep changing. Maybe you take, you carry. So why is it like that? Because actually it's so tiny. The soul is so tiny, but it's so powerful. The soul brings its energy, and the body is active. So similarly, Prabhupada writes that actually it is Supreme Lord because of whom everything is floating. So when a person is alive, the person can swim along. After that person dies, the soul departs, the person drowns. So the same way, this is what happens with respect to the soul also. With respect to the general material universe also, it is by the presence of the Lord that everything is sustained. Now, what about this point about Pushnami Chaushadhi Sarva Somo Bhutva Rasatmaka? That I nourish the moon. Now, according to modern science, photosynthesis is what brings about the transformation by which we can get edible food through the plant world. That is true, but Krishna is not talking about that. Krishna is talking specifically about Pushnami. So Rasatmakaha. He says, I nourish in what sense? Rasatmakaha, the juice. The juice comes because of my arrangement, and it happens through the moon. So now we have to know that scientific research is never complete, and science is ever evolving. So the ideas of science that are considered today to be bedrock truths may be rejected tomorrow as outdated ideas. So we should not, there is no need to, the history of time and history of ideas has shown that no man-made idea has survived the test of time. That all man-made ideas which were considered infallible at one time are eventually shown to be fallible. So we shouldn't put too much faith in doubt. What does it mean to put faith in doubt? That means science may come up with particular explanations, material mechanisms for explaining certain phenomena. And that may be true in a limited extent. But we don't have to put undue amount of faith in that, because it's ultimately, it's one conception. If you look at the history of science also, there have been so many different theories which have come up. Some of them have lasted for some time, some have lasted for more. But ultimately, all these explanations are incomplete. They may be correct in a limited perspective, but they are not correct in the ultimate perspective. So that's why what we understand is that when there is, if the Lord himself is saying that he is providing nourishment through the moon, then there is some mechanism which we don't know about. Now there are some researchers who say that there are some research has been done that when the vegetation is growing, say when the crops are growing, if at that time the overhead is cloudy and the moon is not there in the sky at night, then the rate of plant crop vegetable growth is less. and when there is the moon shining at night, the growth is more. So this sort of empirical research is ultimately indecisive. It may come to the right conclusion or it may go to a wrong conclusion. That's why we don't focus on empirical research. We focus on Shabda, and to the extent empirical research can help us in understanding Shabda, we use it, but otherwise we don't focus on it. So now, after describing this, how Krishna is making arrangement at the terrestrial level, now we look at how Krishna is making arrangement at the physiological level. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritah Pranapana Samayuktah Pachamyannam Chaturvidham. So here Krishna is now moving on to physiological arrangements that he makes. So 12th was cosmological, that he is providing the sun and the energy and the light that comes from it. Then 13 was terrestrial, how he is sustaining the earth, and now it is physiological, how he is sustaining the body. So Vaishwanar is the Devta who presides over digestion. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva, that it is I who become, Bhutva means I become Vaishwanar. That means it is not that there is a complete oneness between Krishna and Vaishwanar, but just like in the Vibhuti Yoga chapter, some kind of correlation is described. There, of course, the correlation is more in terms of, as we discussed, the one among the many, the one above the many. Here the correlation is more in terms of it is the Vaishwanar gets power to digest and make all the arrangements by the grace of the Lord. Yes, so the sun gets power to give light by the arrangement of the Lord. So Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritah Praninam. So actually this applies not just to human beings, it applies to all living beings. Praninam, the word prani refers to all living entities. Deham Ashritah. So the living entities are, as 15.7 has said, Mamaivamsho. They are parts of Krishna. They are meant to live in shelter of Krishna. But instead now they have taken shelter of the body. Deham Ashritaha. And having taken shelter of the body, they are trying to enjoy at the bodily level. But when they are trying to enjoy thus at the bodily level, they themselves can't maintain the body by their independent effort. No. We are living in a body, we think not only that this is my body, but we think I am the body. But actually speaking, we can't maintain the body ourselves. Pranapana Samayuktaha. Digestion, how does it take place? Now there may be certain chemicals involved, and chemicals also play a role, but Pranapana Samayuktaha. That actually by the movement of prana and apan, the modern science talks about peristalsis, and peristalsis, how the food that we swallow, chew and swallow, that goes down because of the diaphragm, the motions that happen in the alimentary canal. That is true. Now how do those motions happen? The Vedic, the Gita worldview explains, the Vedic worldview from which Gita is based. It explains that actually this happens by the movement of the airs in the body. Pranapana Samayuktaha. So this is when a person is unable to excrete, when a person gets constipation, that is because there is not adequate air to excrete the waste matter from the body. So the prana, the various airs are very important in all the functions of the body, and they play a vital role even in digestion also. Pranapana Samayuktaha. So by keeping in balance the up, as Prabhupada, the downgoing air and the up and the outgoing air. So Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamya Annam. I digest the food. Which are the foods? Chaturvidham. So the 4 different kinds of food. We talk about these 4 different kinds of food even in our Mangalarti, that the spiritual master prepares the 4 different kinds of food and offers to Krishna, and then distributes it to everyone. So that is the Chaturvidham, 4 kinds of foods. That is the chewed, swallowed, sucked, and like that. So now when we talk about these 4 kinds of food, drunk also, So now when you talk about these 4 kinds of foods, the important point to recognize is that we can eat the food, but after that we don't know what happens. We can't digest the food ourselves. Who digests the food? Actually, it just happens as far as we know it. We put the food inside and then it gets digested. The only time when we think about our digestive system is when it doesn't work. That's the time when we think about, oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? So it's a blessing when it works, but we don't think about it. As it is said, God gives and forgives. We get and forget. So therefore, if we contemplate seriously, we'll recognize that the body's functioning is not in our hands. We may provide food for the body. That is a part of our duty to maintain the body also. But then even that alone, even no matter how competently we do it, that alone is not enough for the functioning of the body. After we digest the food also, after we eat the food, it has to be digested. And how does digestion happen? It happens by the arrangement of Krishna through Vaishvanar. So we may know, some people may say, oh, I don't believe in all this idea of some devta supervising digestion. So, but if we think about it seriously, even scientifically, we'll understand that digestion is a very complex process. It doesn't work very easily. Why is it the process of digestion complex? Because digestion requires us to it involves many complex reactions which transform the food into usable energy. So nowadays it is the age of transplantation and usage of artificial organs and limbs. So people, when their hand is damaged or amputated, then they use artificial hand. So like that, they may use different artificial limbs. So some researchers have been trying that can we make an artificial digestive system that when the person can't digest food, then we just put a digestive machine inside. But they found that if we try to use a machine to digest the food, the process is so complex that a machine won't suffice. Actually, we'll need a factory, and not just a factory, a chain of factories that may extend over several miles at times. It's a complex process. So who does that actually? Who does that? All those complex reactions. No one knows who does it. We just assume that it happens. So like that, not just the digestion, but in the alimentary canal, not just digestion in the alimentary canal, but all the bodily functions, very few of them are under our control. There are voluntary bodily functions, like say, I raise my hand, now I speak. These are to some extent in my control. But there are involuntary bodily functions, like blood circulation, respiration, the digestion of food. These are vital for the functioning and even the survival of the body. But we don't do them. It is Krishna who does them. Researchers have found out that if when a person is sick and is about to die, at that time, sometimes artificial ventilation is used. So breathing can be made, can be sustained artificially. So like that, some of the functionalities of the body can be artificially externally sustained. But actually this is very expensive, and to keep a person artificially alive for even a day costs thousands and thousands of rupees. I mean more also. And if it has to be done for several days, it costs even much more. So now when we have to spend so much, first of all we can't do those functions ourselves. We have to use external machines to do them, and when we do them using the external machines also, still it costs so much. So who is it who is doing it normally? Just to dismiss it away by saying that it all happens by chance or by nature, it is no explanation. Yes, it is not by chance, it is so well designed, and it is not by nature alone, because nature is not in itself intelligent. Nature doesn't have consciousness or purpose. So there has to be a being with consciousness and purpose who is overseeing it. So when we understand thus that actually Deham Ashrita, we are taking shelter of the body, but the body is ultimately sheltered by Krishna only. So we can't move away from the shelter of Krishna. We are always dependent on Krishna. And even when we are turning away from Krishna, we are still resting on Krishna only. We are still dependent on Krishna for his merciful arrangements, so that we can live at the material level also properly. So to live at the material level, to enjoy at the material level also, we need Krishna's arrangement. In the Ramayana, Ravana, when he sees Sita before he's about to kidnap her, he's flattering her by talking about her beauty, and he says that, your beauty is so great that I think after making you, the creator must have retired, because the creator must have thought that I cannot make anyone more beautiful than this is perfection of my beauty. So even Ravana recognizes that I did not make this beauty. So, but still he thinks that this beauty is meant for my enjoyment. So even if we want to enjoy sense objects, who makes those sense objects? We don't make them. They're actually made by the Supreme Lord. They're made by the Supreme Lord. So that is the important thing that we need to understand, that ultimately it is the Lord who creates everything. It is He who is the sustainer, the maintainer. It is He who is the caretaker of the body. It is He who is the arranger of all bodily necessities in terms of internal functioning. So by recognizing this, we can develop the Jnana-chakshu, that Krishna is maintaining us at all times. And even when we want materials, whether it is survival at the material level or it is enjoyment at the material level, ultimately we ourselves cannot do either. We cannot even survive, and nor can we ourselves create the sense objects for enjoyment. So in this way, even if we can't perceive the Atma Tattva, even if we are consciousness at material level, at the material level we can see the benedictory nature of the Lord, we can see His arrangements, and thereby learn to develop appreciation for Him. Learn to start appreciating and connecting with the spiritual reality, with the supreme spiritual reality, Krishna, who is maintaining the material reality, so that we can live and do our material things in this world. And this is the first step in developing Jnana-chakshu. And then Krishna doesn't just arrange for our material life, but his primary purpose is to elevate us to spiritual level of consciousness. And that's what he talks about in the next verse, which we'll discuss in the next class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.